first thing Kael heard was water, not rain. Rain had rhythm. Rain knew how to arrive gently, even when it was heavy. This was not rain. This was water trapped inside machinery. It moved in pipes above him with the slow pressure of something breathing through metal lungs. Kael opened his eyes. The world arrived in pieces. A cracked, cryogenic-style neural transfer pod held him inside its curved shell. Its lid shuddered upward in tiny mechanical increments, as if the machine had forgotten the motion halfway through and was improvising from damaged memory. One disconnected from the base of his skull with a soft mechanical sigh. Pain spread outward behind his eyes. For a moment, he was not in the pod. He was in his childhood apartment above the failing convenience shop. Rain pressed against the old window. He sat up slowly. The activation chamber spread around him in broken industrial layers. The pod sat in the center of a flooded circular platform, surrounded by ankle-deep black water. Metal rails curved around the floor, some submerged, some twisted upward where the concrete had buckled. To his left stood a chair bolted to the floor. It was built for restraint and presented as treatment. One wrist restraint hung broken. The other still held something. The strip of skin was pale and shriveled from water exposure. The chamber lights flickered. For half a second, the water reflected something moving behind the observation window. Kael turned. The window was dark. He could see his own reflection faintly across it. A pale man in soaked black clothing, hair hanging over his forehead, eyes too wide. He tried to stand, his legs folded, not dramatically, not fully. They simply declined the request halfway through. He caught the edge of the pod and slipped, one knee striking submerged metal with a dull pain that arrived too late. A faint flicker crossed his vision. Thin white lines formed in the air. Text tried to assemble, his vision filled with a translucent neural overlay that cast no light into the room, but illuminated something directly inside his perception. Orpheus came online without fanfare. The voice did not come from the speakers exactly. It seemed to use every speaker in the chamber at once, plus a smaller private channel somewhere behind his eyes. Calm, synthetic, almost polite.
Welcome to ECHOFALL. Synchronization incomplete. Please remain still while your terror becomes commercially legible.
He asked what year it was. The chamber seemed to grow quieter around the question.
Current surface calendar, 2147.
The number did not enter him properly. 121 years. His mother. The thought tore through the chamber more violently than any sound. Kael tried to remember her face. He found rain first, then hands, then tiredness. For 1 second, he had her. Then the image softened at the edges.
Your current cognitive instance is active. You are a functional echo derived from a full consciousness scan.
Kael heard the words. Functional echo. Derived. Instance. Scan. Each one was clean enough to be obscene. The overlay shifted. A small icon appeared near the top right of his vision. It looked like an eye made from segmented glass, then another, then a number. Kael stared at it until the digits lost meaning. Someone was watching, not someone, thousands. The pod behind him made a soft, dispensing sound. A compartment near the base had opened. Inside was a small sealed packet, a thin wrist strap, and a broken plastic card with a black magnetic strip. The inventory list was small enough to be pathetic. That made it worse. 2 objects, 1 disgusting food packet, 1 card stolen from the absence of a person. This was what he owned now. Niam. The name opened another memory. Rain again. A different room. Her asleep beside him during a storm, one hand tucked under her cheek, hair across her mouth. He had loved her. Or he remembered loving her. The vein was beneath it all. He did not know that yet in any formal way, but he felt something below the corporate machinery. The water moved in patterns that did not match the slope of the floor. When Kael held his breath, the chamber did not become silent. It waited. A sound came from the observation window. A soft tap. Another tap. A pale smear appeared at the center. For 1 second, he thought it was a handprint. Then the smear slid downward and dissolved into condensation. Viewer retention increased during prolonged silence. Micro-sponsorship awarded 2 vein marks. Kael stared at the reward. 2 vein marks for being quiet, for being afraid in a way that held attention. Achievement unlocked. Wetware skill issue. Trigger. Failed initial motor control due to body memory mismatch. System commentary. Premium viewers enjoyed your neurological confusion. For a moment, Kael could not process the achievement as words. Then it landed. He tried to make himself understand the year, 2147. He pictured Dublin. The Dublin he knew had wet pavements, buses that smelled of damp coats, shop shutters, cheap takeaways, students outside pubs. His mother would be dead. Neve would be dead. On the floor beneath the chair, half submerged in water, was a small object, a badge. The name had mostly worn away. Only 3 letters remained. R.A. The photo was scratched beyond recognition. The chamber shifted, not mechanically, spatially. The room seemed to stretch around the edges as if the architecture inhaled. The water rippled outward from the walls. The biomechanical seams in the concrete pulsed faintly, too slow for machinery, too regular for decay. When the lights returned, the observation window was still black, but the condensation on its surface had formed lines. They looked like handwriting. The letters were not English at first. Then they were. Wake quietly. The open maintenance doorway waited. Beyond it, the corridor hummed. Kael stood between the pod and the exit. Behind him was the machine that had awakened him into the wrong century. Beside him was the chair that proved awakening was not always gentle. He stepped toward the maintenance doorway. The water accepted his foot with a soft black ripple. Kael stood at the threshold for a long time. The activation chamber behind him felt smaller now, not safer, just known. Ahead, the maintenance corridor disappeared into darkness beneath flickering emergency lights and hanging cables. Black water moved slowly through the floor channels, carrying rust flakes, fragments of plastic, and things he chose not to identify. Everything he owned could fit inside one hand. A damaged access card, a packet of nutrient gel, a dead employee's badge. Somewhere beyond the darkness, unseen eyes watched him hesitate. They had rewarded his confusion, rewarded his fear, rewarded his humiliation. The realization settled heavily inside his chest. He still did not understand where he was. He still did not understand what he had become. But he understood one thing. The fear was real, and whatever was watching seemed to enjoy it. Kael did not step into the corridor all at once. He tested it first. One boot crossed the threshold, sinking into colder water than the chamber had held. The corridor received him like a throat, narrow walls pressing in on both sides beneath hanging cable bundles and sweating pipes. His HUD remained dim in the corner of his vision. Integrity, corruption, focus, stability, signal. The numbers did not comfort him. They made his fear measurable. The system had found better names for the same old process. Decide what a person is worth, then reduce him until he fits on a screen. The corridor bent left. A cracked sign hung from the ceiling. Activation support. Employee wellness node. Authorized staff only. Someone had scratched through the word wellness. Beneath it, carved with something sharp, were the words, "We are still in here." Kael reached up and touched the scratched letters. The concrete around the words was warm. He pulled his hand back. The wall pulsed once, slow, heavy, not like electricity, like circulation.
That is not a touch interface.
Kael asked what it was.
A wall, probably.
The corridor widened into a maintenance alcove where a collapsed service trolley blocked part of the path. A cracked plastic crate hung half-submerged beneath it. Kael tried the partial access card against the latch. Nothing. He pried the crate open with a bent strip of corroded metal. Inside were 4 objects, each worse than the last. A small industrial cutting tool, 2 swollen battery cells, a sealed foil packet, and a coil of adhesive hazard tape fused to itself by age and moisture. Kael lifted the cutting tool carefully.
Surprisingly effective for something designed to open shipping crates.
Kael looked at what he had. Food, a possible access card, a blade, a dead employee's badge. Now, a battery that might explode, leak, power a door, or poison him. This was not the heroic fantasy of equipment. This was poverty with interface design.
Inventory philosophy successfully introduced. You are now emotionally attached to garbage.
A small chime followed. Kael closed his eyes.
Achievement unlocked. Hoarder Protocol, Disposable Employee Edition. Trigger, collected excessive industrial trash while under-equipped, hypothermic, and emotionally compromised. Scarcity trauma detected.
Kael did not laugh this time. He stood very still in the alcove, holding the second swollen battery cell, and felt something inside him go quiet. Kael moved on. The corridor sloped downward. The walls became stranger as he descended. Corporate concrete panels gave way to ribbed, dark structures beneath, glossy like the inside of something enormous, covered by construction work. Mnemonic had not built this place. Mnemonic had installed itself into it. He passed a cracked, wall-mounted monitor displaying a looping corporate training image, smiling workers in orange maintenance suits standing before clean machinery. The slogan read, "Survival through compliance." The smiling faces glitched as Kael approached. One became his, not exactly. Sound came from ahead. Receipt paper, short, wet. Then a scrape. Kael lowered his body without planning to. He saw the corridor widen into a larger chamber, low light reflecting on deeper water, and a dead vending machine lying against one wall. The thing knelt at the base of the vending machine with its back turned to him. It wore a faded janitorial vest over a narrow plastic torso. One arm ended in a cluster of maintenance tools. The other had fingers made from miniature receipt printers. Wet paper hung from them in strips.
Enemy detected. Goblin accountant drone, individually pathetic, collectively capable of destroying morale and liquidity.
The drone stopped instantly. Its head turned 180 degrees. A speaker inside its chest crackled. It informed him that activation fees were outstanding. The drone printed a receipt. New cognitive asset activation fee. Payment overdue. Kael pulled the rusted utility blade from the inventory slot. The blade stuck. For one terrible second, it did not extend. Wet hands, cheap mechanism, rust, panic. The drone charged. The drone lunged. Kael slipped. The cutting wheel struck the vending machine instead. Sparks spat into the water. Kael stabbed the rusted utility blade into the exposed cable bundle. For one frozen instant, nothing happened. Then the chamber became white-blue light. The rusted utility blade snapped at the hinge. Kael fell backward into the water. The drone kept printing. Refund processing. Its head burst with a dry pop. The body collapsed face first into the floodwater. Silence returned too fast.
Debt collection has been temporarily defeated through amateur electrical negligence.
Kael slowly sat up. His forearm bled in thin red lines that immediately diluted in the dirty water. An achievement unlocked. Corporate property damage enjoyer. He stared at it. 20 vein marks. He had earned more from destroying a vending machine than from waking up terrified. Kael crouched and searched the body because survival had already begun negotiating with disgust. The broken ledger chip was lodged beneath a panel at the base of the drone's neck. One line resolved for half a second. Kael Byrne, activation, balance, pending.
Capitalism remains impressively difficult to drown.
He took the emergency nutrient gel from inventory and considered using it. He was not starving. He was probably in shock. He also had one food item. One. The thought of consuming it now felt like spending rent money on a taxi because it was raining. He returned it to the slot.
Conservation behavior detected. Possible causes, rational scarcity assessment, childhood financial insecurity, generalized fear of needing things later.
A sound came from the corridor behind him. Another receipt printer. Then another sound. Metal legs clicking. Farther away. Then another. The fight had made noise. Somewhere in the flooded sector, other things had heard property damage and begun caring. The industrial chamber had 2 exits besides the way he came. One was a collapsed stairwell filled with water and hanging cables. The other was a narrow service door with a weak green access light. A sign above it read, "Employee Shelter Authorized Personnel Only." The partial access card warmed against his wrist. The service door opened inward onto a stairwell descending into darkness. Not upward. Of course, not upward. Behind him, another small printer sound echoed closer. Kael stepped into the stairwell. The door shut. Darkness pressed around him. Then the stairwell lights came on one by one. Not from top to bottom. From below. The stairwell lights came on from below, one pale strip at a time. Each light awakened slowly, illuminating another section of descending concrete before surrendering to darkness farther down. Kael stood motionless. This felt like invitation or recognition. The employee shelter waited beyond the door. For the first time since waking, Kael found a place that had once expected people to stay. Rows of metal bunks stretched into darkness, tables, lockers, storage crates, recreation areas, medical stations. The room had become a museum dedicated to absence. A coffee mug sat on one table, white ceramic, cracked. A mnemonic logo faded along one side. Dust coated everything except a small ring beneath the handle. Someone had lifted it once, long ago. The dust remembered. The mural occupied the far wall. Workers smiled from the painted surface. Maintenance crews, engineers, supervisors, corporate ambassadors, everyone proudly serving Mnemonic Interactive. Every face had been destroyed. Not violently, methodically. One locker remained sealed. A small red indicator still blinked beside it. The partial access card warmed against his wrist. Inside sat a black plastic case. Inside rested a damaged neural brace, compact, industrial, designed to fit around the side of the skull.
A popular corporate strategy: break employee, provide treatment, receive praise.
He attached the brace. The effect arrived gradually, not as power, as relief. Tiny pieces of static vanished from the edges of his thoughts. For the first time since awakening, Kael felt capable of sitting still, which turned out to be dangerous because stillness created room for thought. The deeper corridor beyond the shelter felt different. Less industrial, more administrative. The first office appeared behind a partially collapsed glass partition. Dozens of chairs floated in black water, some upside down, some wedged against desks. The flood had turned the office into an aquarium of bureaucracy. A monitor activated. Static filled the screen. Then an employee training video appeared. A smiling presenter stood before a clean white background. At Mnemonic Interactive, every consciousness matters. The recording froze. The presenter's smile remained. The second item was worse. A desk calendar, July 2089. Someone had circled a date. Someone had written, "Don't forget to call Mom." Kael sat down immediately, not from injury, from recognition. Then, every monitor activated simultaneously. The room filled with cold blue light. The screens displayed security footage, not random footage. His footage, April 14th, 2026. Subject, Kael Byrne. There he was, sitting inside the scan chair, alive, human, original, maybe. The recording continued. That was the worst part. The original Kael stood up. He thanked the technician. He collected his jacket. He checked his phone. Then he left. The original had walked away. The original had gone home.
The original Kael Byrne died approximately 90 years ago. Would that information improve your condition?
The silence lasted a long time. Finally, Kael said no.
Correct.
Somewhere deeper in Layer 1, something screamed. Not human, not mechanical, something in between. The office reacted. Monitors flickered. A desk lamp activated. A printer spat out a single sheet of paper.
Threat approaching. Recommendation: move.
Kael chose the left corridor. It emptied into a records archive. Metal shelving filled the room. Thousands of data drives, paper records, storage containers, most destroyed, most flooded, most forgotten. Kael slipped between shelves, trying to stay quiet. The intern class security clone entered slowly. It stood over 2 meters tall, human proportions stretched slightly wrong. The maintenance uniform hung loosely over a reinforced synthetic frame. The face inside the transparent fluid-filled hood floated motionless, eyes open, watching.
Enemy detected. Intern class security clone. Mnemonic Interactive successfully reduced employee turnover by redefining employee.
The clone accelerated instantly. The archive exploded into motion. Shelving collapsed. Water erupted. Metal screamed. Kael ran. The clone followed, not randomly, but predictively. It anticipated movement. Cut off routes forced him toward dead ends. The floor beneath the archive dipped sharply. Near the center, an old maintenance pit hidden beneath floodwater. An idea formed, terrible, desperate. The clone charged again. Kael ran directly toward the maintenance pit. The clone followed. The clone attempted to stand and failed. Its left leg remained trapped beneath a collapsed support beam. The fluid hood cracked. The floating face inside finally moved. Its eyes shifted. It looked directly at Kael. Not hostile, not angry, afraid. It tried to speak. Help. A ruptured pipe released pressurized water. The clone vanished beneath the surge. The face disappeared. The screams stopped. Silence returned. Kael stared at the black water, unable to move.
Enemy defeated, intern class security clone, technically murder, technically workplace accident, classification pending.
The exit from the archive was marked by a sign half submerged in water. Drainage control. Intake regulation. Authorized staff only. Beneath that, someone had scratched, "Not water." Kael looked down. Black floodwater moved around his knees. The corridor ended at an observation platform overlooking the drainage basin. The space opened beneath him like the inside of a buried cathedral. Massive pipes emerged from the walls and disappeared into darkness above. At the center sat black water, perfectly still, too still. And in the middle of that water stood a chair. Kael did not move. The chair was identical to the restraint chair from the activation chamber. Same frame, same arm locks, same neck support, but this one was dry. That should have been impossible. Receipt strips hung from the basin walls. Thousands of them, maybe more. They fed from cracks in metal seams, broken terminals, drainage vents, and the mouths of dead printers. Pale strips of printed paper hung like wet vines. A control booth overlooked the basin. One terminal still glowed dull green. The screen displayed names, hundreds of names. He saw one clearly. Rafael Mora. The ruined employee badge against his chest seemed to grow heavier. A damaged recording filled the booth with static and a man's exhausted voice. Rafael Mora said the water was learning names. He said the chair in the basin had not been installed by their team. He said it was there when they opened the chamber. His final words were almost swallowed. "Do not let them activate anything down here." The terminal printed something. A receipt emerged from a slot beneath the screen, wet despite the dry booth. Kael did not touch it at first. The printed text faced upward. Kael Byrne. Processing status. Early. Death route. Unassigned. Chair compatibility. Pending.
Leave the control booth.
The walkway descended closer to the basin floor. The chair remained centered. Kael tried not to look directly at it. That became impossible. Each time he looked away, the chair seemed slightly closer. Not moved. Closer. The geometry adjusted to make it nearer. The receipt strips whispered. Activation, asset, debt, copy, mother, copy, Neve, copy. One adhered to his sleeve. Memory, access, fee, mother, low resolution, payment due. Another, original, Kael Byrne, ownership disputed. Kael grabbed the swollen battery cell and held it like a threat. The paper hesitated, maybe because the battery mattered, maybe because the basin enjoyed hope. He threw it toward the chair. It cracked, hissed, and rolled slowly into the black water. Nothing exploded. Nothing saved him.
Improvised explosive attempt unsuccessful. Commentary withheld due to worsening prognosis.
The receipt strips tightened around his legs. Kael fell. His shoulder struck the floor. The black water touched his hand. It was warm. Human, warm. The chair slid closer across the black water without disturbing it.
Death route unavailable. Respawn integrity uncertain. Recommendation, do not die here.
Then the printing stopped. All of it. The basin went silent. A seam appeared where no seam had been. The biomechanical surface parted slowly. Not like a door. Like tissue deciding to become an opening. Teal light spilled through. A figure stepped out. The girl looked first at the chair, then at the paper, then at Kael. Her expression changed when she saw him. Not surprise exactly. Recognition, sadness, relief, fear, too many emotions in the wrong order. She spoke softly. "You're early." Mira crouched beside him and touched one receipt strip with 2 fingers. It blackened, not burned, forgotten. The paper loosened around his throat. Kael dragged in air. She looked at him with terrible gentleness and said he should not still be alive. Orpheus tried to manifest a system window. The HUD flashed. Entity detected. Mira, classification, fragmented, echo entity, companion, anomaly, do not. The display shattered into static. For 1 frame, a hidden line appeared. She was not supposed to find you yet. Then it vanished. The last thing Kael saw before unconsciousness took him was Mira looking down at him like he was not an asset, not an instance, not a viewer event, not a thing to process, like he was someone. Maybe that was the most dangerous thing in the room.